Okay, so the reason we brought deliberative democracy to Ireland was in response to the Great Recession in 2008. At that time, Ireland had been more badly impacted than many of the other countries around Europe, and the Troika were in, there was austerity, the IMF and the World Bank, and the government had absolutely no control over fiscal policy. People were on the streets, and trust in politics, politicians and policy making was on the floor. So it was clear that something needed to be done, something radically different. From the politicians and policymakers' point of view, it was clear that they needed to do something to reconnect with citizens, to rebuild trust and to rebuild legitimacy. But on the other hand, politicians also had issues with different policies where they had inter-party differences. So the coalition government at that time, the smaller left-wing party, had declared that marriage equality was a civil rights issue of our generation, and the right-wing or the centre-right governing party, there were a lot of differences. Some politicians agreed with it, others didn't. So it made sense for them to be able to put something like that to the citizens rather than to a vote of the politicians within the different parties. So the first and most important thing we did was have random selection of ordinary Irish citizens. We needed to make sure these weren't the type of people that usually turned up at town halls or at meetings with politicians. So we had an opinion polling company select people, and 50-50 men and women from every region, people who only had primary education up to degrees, people who were unemployed, had blue-collar jobs and who had white-collar jobs. So a cross-section of Irish society. After that, we made sure that they heard good balanced evidence, both from experts and from advocates. And then they sat at round tables and deliberated. So there we had strong facilitation, and we made sure that nobody dominated the discussion and that even introverts got to speak. And at that discussion, people were talking with people who were very different to themselves. And they were talking about what was the best for the future of Irish society. In one of the groups, we had politicians who were at the round table, and the politicians even obeyed these rules and didn't dominate. At another time, it was only citizens, and then it went to the politicians later, who set up a special parliamentary committee, and that also worked very well. What was important was the links between the citizens and the politicians, and that helped rebuild trust between the two. And you can see in Eurobarometer now that trust is rebuilding in Ireland. So two of the biggest issues that we discussed were two progressive issues, one on marriage equality and the other on abortion provision. And as a result, Ireland became the first country in the world to vote for marriage equality by popular vote rather than a vote of the Parliament. And in fact, I think we might even have voted for it ahead of the Finns, which was quite something given Ireland's past. Assembly obviously wasn't the only factor for that. People have been campaigning for it, obviously, for years. But what it did do is it allowed the politicians to put it to the people, it allowed politicians to get over their differences, and then also the people saw that ordinary people like them, had looked at this evidence, they debated it in detail. And on abortion especially, people were very surprised about how liberal the Citizen Assembly had been, and a lot of commentary was that the people certainly wouldn't follow, that it was far too liberal for the people in general or the people of Middle Ireland. But in fact, when it came to the vote, we saw that the Citizen Assembly actually reflected the people very well, and the numbers were strikingly similar in favour of liberalisation of abortion policy afterwards.